Before we get started with today's video, I just wanted to issue a brief apology and a couple of corrections. I will have some edits popping in throughout the video, so you will see a jump scare of my beautiful face. And I want to apologize for my voice today. I am either getting or getting over a cold, so with that, let's get right back into the video. Shall we? The United States has a history of dangerous working conditions, especially in the time before unions. When unions became more prevalent in industries, employers began to push back and take extra measures to ensure that their workers wouldn't unionize. In 1911, one of the deadliest industrial disasters occurred in Manhattan, New York, and had a ripple effect in factory safety standards for years to come. Today, we're talking about the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire. Let's get into it. Hi, I'm Jax, and this is Morbidly Macabre, the show where I talk about morbid history, true crime, cryptids, and other spooky topics that might catch my interest. This is a bit of a weird week for me since I normally only post on Fridays. However, I did have a scheduling issue last week, so I'm giving you a little bit extra this week. Today we'll be talking about the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire, and Friday we will be talking about the Fresno Nightcrawler. If you like what you see, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and if you have any topic suggestions, please consider leaving them in the comments down below. I also stream over on Twitch 5 to 6 days a week at Jax Marie Gaming, and I'm also on TikTok at Just Jax Marie. Now let's get right back into the story. On March 25th, 1911, a Saturday, the workday began as any other. The workers arrived at work at the Ash Building in Manhattan, New York, and went up to the 8th, 9th, and 10th floor. They were then locked into the building with the exits and stairwells locked to prevent unauthorized breaks or to prevent stealing from the factory itself. And there they worked, producing shirtwaist, a woman's blouse that was very popular during the time period, but was also starting to fall out of fashion. The factory was owned by Max Planck and Isaac Harris, Jewish immigrants who we will mention again later in the episode. They employed about 1,000 workers who were primarily Italian and Jewish immigrant women and girls, and they worked long hours, at least 6 days a week for very low wages. In today's money, they would be making between $3.67 and $6.29 per hour. This was about 2 years after they had a very serious union strike that reformed some of the working conditions for factory workers. However, this particular factory did push back against a lot of the reformation, and they refused to make it a closed factory, which means that only union workers could work there. So while the unionizing did give them a short raise and reduce the work week that they had, it didn't actually fix the major issues like being locked into the factory floor, and it didn't give them the same protections that a union would give us today. Some of the dangerous working conditions that I forgot to mention during the video besides the fire hazard is the close quarters of these buildings would actually lead to workers getting sick, something called the white lung due to inhalation of cotton fibers. The fire flared up on the 8th floor about 4:40 p.m. that afternoon. The exact cause of the fire is unknown, but it's theorized to have either been a cigarette or a lit match that was not properly stamped out before it was disposed in a scrap bin that contained fabric scraps and other very flammable materials. Considering that they were working with fabric here and a lot of fabric, this place was a tinderbox. It would go up in flames. Or it was possibly started by the engine from a sewing machine. The former is the most likely cause of the fire. There was also the possibility of arson since the shirtwaist was going out of fashion, but it was not suspected in this case. However, the businessmen in this situation, Max Planck and Isaac Harris, did have a history of suspicious fires because the clothing article they were working on was going out of fashion. At the time of the fire, there was about 500 workers on site. The fire began on the 8th floor, and they were able to notify the people on the 10th floor and begin the evacuation. However, there was no way for them to get in contact with the 9th floor. By the time they were notified of the fire on the 9th floor, The fire was already there. Workers rushed to the door only to find that it was still locked from the outside. The supervisor, who had the key, who would be able to release them from the floor, had already escaped without unlocking any of their chains. And the factory owners who were there that day with their children visiting the factory also escaped to the roof and didn't think to notify the people on the 9th floor. Some of the workers died in the initial crush and the desperation to escape. Others tried to use the fire escape out the window. However, the fire escape was poorly built and poorly maintained and actually collapsed under the weight of the woman and the heat of the fire. It might have been broken before the fire itself broke out. However, the women who were climbing it, about 20, there's no confirmed number, did fall to their deaths. They were able to evacuate some of the workers through the elevator. However, at this point, the panic did set in, and some of the workers started jumping on top of the elevator, trying to catch the elevator cable and maybe work their way down, but they were landing on top of the elevator, which rendered the elevator unusable as it couldn't support the weight of the people who were on top of the elevator. If the victims didn't die from asphyxiation and fire, they died from jumping out the window. Firefighters attempted to rescue the victims on the 9th floor. However, at the time, their ladders only went to the 7th floor. And they had those safety nets to attempt to catch people, but it was described as witnesses as tearing like paper due to the weight of the woman falling. In total, 123 women between the ages of 14 and 43, and 23 men died from this fire. Now let's discuss the aftermath. Victims were taken to Charity's Pier. Charity Pier is also known as Misery Lane, and it was used to display the bodies for identification purposes. However, like with most things in human history, other humans wanted to go check it out, people who had no reason to be there. So it did become kind of like a dark tourism hotspot for people to come see the recently deceased from these fires who were still yet to be identified. All of the victims were identified except for 6. However, those 6 have now been identified thanks to a historian named Michael Hirsch. In the book Triangle, The Fire That Changed America, the author describes the identification process and really humanized the process well. Some of these bodies were burnt well beyond recognition, and Dave Von Trail describes the struggle that families had even looking for the smallest thing to show that, yes, this is their family member, whether it be a nondescript piece of jewelry or the lining of their shoes. It's a really good read if you're looking for more information on the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. Just be prepared to be emotionally wrecked when you finish reading the book. But what happened to the owners, you're probably wondering? Max Blank and Isaac Harris survived, and they were indicted on charges of first and second degree manslaughter. However, their defense attorney poked holes in the witness statements and discredited some of the witnesses and was able to prove beyond reasonable doubt that Blank and Harris didn't know what was going on. They didn't know about the lock, and they got off scot-free. Their trial took place in December of that year, and they were acquitted of all charges. And they were paid out by the insurance company. They were awarded $60,000 from their insurance company, about $400 per victim. In 1913, however, they were sued for wrongful death and found liable in order to pay $75 per victim. On April 2, 1911, a meeting was held at the Metropolitan Opera House to demand changes, especially in fire safety. A few days later, there was a funeral march to remember those who were dead, and an estimated 350,000 people turned out. After pressure from union activists, New York's governor at the time signed a law creating the Factory Investigating Commission. The commission, with the assistance of Frances Perkins, who was a workers' rights activist at the time and later the 4th Secretary of Labor and the first woman to serve in a presidential cabinet, investigated almost 2,000 factories. With their investigations, they enacted 8 laws to cover factory inspections, sanitation, and employment rules for women and children. The next year, they pushed for more laws, entirely rewriting New York State's labor law, and created the State Department of Labor. The bright spot of this tragedy is that the reform that followed helped create labor law changes across the United States that protect hundreds of millions of lives in the years that follow, even to now. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and remember to come back on Friday for the Fresno Nightcrawler. I stream over on Twitch 5 to 6 days a week at Jax Marie Gaming, and I occasionally post on TikTok at Just Jax Marie. Thank you again so much for watching. If you liked today's video, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and I will see you all next time. Remember to stay curious. Goodbye.